Now we've climbed to our cruising altitude. As we're nearing our destination, of course, at some point we will want to descend. Now, a descent in many ways is just, well, a mirror of the conditions during climb. Now we have that component of the weight not dragging us back, but actually moving, pointing in the direction of our flight path. So we actually need to reduce power if we want to keep our speed. Also, we have less induced drag due to the less lift we need, so we have excess thrust because of that as well. Normally, we like to try to fly partial power descents, so not gliding descents with no power. That's mainly for reasons of engine cooling. Many engines don't really like if you, I don't know, fly for 5 minutes with idle power, especially in cold conditions. All right. So then, of course, there's the extreme case of the descent, so to speak, and that's the glide. So we're gliding with no engine power at all. Now, during normal operations, of course, we have a little bit of thrust of the propeller still, even if it's operating in idle. But it's really important to master or to know how to do a gliding descent because of engine failures. Now, of course, if you have an engine failure, you really have no thrust at all. And it's important to know your airplane's capabilities and the procedures in that case. But there is a separate lesson on that, of course. Still, we are talking now about the basics of a gliding descent. If you want to fly your maximum gliding distance, so you want to reach that airstrip over there, for example, that's a few miles away, in an engine failure. Well, of course, you need to know your your gliding capabilities and also your correct gliding speed. Now, there is one speed called LD max. It's the highest lift to drag ratio. Actually, it's not a speed. In essence, it's an angle of attack. And at a specific angle of attack, as you can see in the graph, you have the maximum LD, lift to drag ratio. And that is the angle of attack you should fly to maximize your gliding distance. And many airplanes, of course, don't have an angle of attack indicator. So there's no way to tell if we are at the exact angle, correct angle of attack right now. So in the pilot's operating handbook, this is kind of translated into a speed. And this is also why often there are different speeds. In the Cessna 152, it's always the same speed, 60 knots, because there's a rather small weight range, so to speak. But in bigger airplanes, in the pilot's operating handbook, there is a speed given for each weight. And if you are heavier, then you need to fly faster to reach that maximum lift drag ratio. But the gliding distance that you achieve by flying exactly that speed is exactly the same. But for example, if you're 200 kilograms lighter, you need to fly, it's just an example now, 68 knots. And if you're 200 kilos heavier, you fly 70 knots. And this will give you the maximum lift to drag ratio, and you will still be able to glide the same distance. Just with a heavier aircraft, you will be there quicker because you have to fly a higher speed that produces this target angle of attack. Of course, it's important to reduce your drag when you really need to stretch your gliding distance, so retract any gear or flaps. Also, really stick to your best glide speed if you want to maximize gliding distance. It might be tempting, especially to put the nose up to kind of stretch your glide, so to fly slower, but this will reduce your gliding distance for sure. And it's the same thing with flying faster. So if you really need this distance, you need to fly that speed exactly. So be sure to also trim for that speed. Now in a glide, also there's an absence of the propeller effects that I talked to you before. So you even need some light left rudder, pedal pressure. There's actually a second speed, a special speed during glides. That's the minimum sink speed. This is actually the speed that gives you the most time in the air, not the maximum gliding distance, but the most time in the air. This could, for example, be useful if you are over the ocean and you have an engine failure at 10,000 feet and you know you cannot reach land, so you will have to ditch, but you want to stay in the air for as long as possible to prepare the airplane for ditching. Then this would be a case where you could fly minimum sink speed. However, this is very often not published in the manual, but it usually is just a few knots slower than the maximum the maximum gliding distance speed. As I said before, this is very important. Even if you, especially in an engine failure, if you notice you may not be able to reach that field, it's tempting to pull the nose up to try to stretch the glide, but it will not stretch the glide, and there's the real danger of stalling the airplane then in an attempt to stretch the glide. But we'll talk about that in the engine failure lesson. Okay, how do we enter a glide? Well, of course, reduce the power. If you have an engine failure, that's done by itself. You will have a loss of slipstream immediately, so the nose will tend to pitch down a lot, so maybe adjust this a little bit. And then first dissipate excess speed. First reduce the speed, maybe an almost level flight to the desired gliding speed, and then pitch down to start your descent. Again, you should know approximately the correct attitude for a descent, for example, with the best gliding speed, and then just adjust this attitude and thereafter do your fine-tuning on the airspeed. On a level off, it's just the same as with climbs. Be sure to have a bit of lead, so with 100 feet with a 1000 feet per minute descent rate, start your level off 100 feet before your target altitude. Also, remember during level off to add power again. If you intend to increase your speed after the level off, you should add the power pretty early. All right, so this concludes the lesson about climbing and descending. For that special case of the gliding descent, we will talk about that a little bit more in the engine failure during cruise lesson. All right, now let's try some climbs and descents in the airplane. I see you there.